The What It Takes Radio Company is proud to present the first real regular edition of the Transformation Zone podcast. It's a conversation. And welcome to the Transformation Zone. And we begin with a story of transformation that began on December 7th.
On Sunday, December 7, 1941, shortly before 8 a.m., Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States of America by bombing the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The base was attacked by 350 Imperial Japanese aircrafts. Though the raid only lasted 75 minutes, the Japanese destroyed or damaged nearly 20 American naval vessels, including 8 battleships and more than 340 airplanes. Over 2,400 Americans died in the attack, and many more were wounded. While the attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise, tensions between the US and Japan had deteriorated over the decade, in particular with regards to Japan's expansion into China. The plan for attacking Pearl Harbor was to destroy the US's Pacific Fleet, a move which would give the Japanese time to carry out its plans to keep control of the Pacific without US interference. The shock of the attack without declaration of war enraged the American public and rallied the nation to get behind a war many hoped to avoid. At the beginning of his speech to Congress requesting a declaration of war, President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered this now famous line.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
On December 8, 1941, one day after the attack, the United States Congress declared war on Japan, officially entering World War II.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Transformation Zone. Yes, it is the 7th of December, and of course, that is the date that is remembered for many people around the world still, even though most of them were not alive at that time. That's right, December 7th, 1941, the day that will live in infamy. That's when the United States was attacked by Japan, and it went on to lead to American involvement in the Second World War. Truly a transformational event, for sure. But obviously, most of that was quite negative. Obviously, it was tragic, but it led to so many other things. And in some cases, we're going to discover that in its unique way, it oftentimes could lead to something that is transformational for many people, even personally. And so that's what I would like to celebrate today in this day, because also this was a day, along with the worldwide attention to the situation that happened, but also to the situation that just happened, and that is the restoration of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, France. Right after 5 years ago, it was, as they said, ashes to ashes. And yet, through the time and through the commitment of so many people, it was a transformation. Today, the cathedral was fully restored to more, much more than the building that was there before the terrible fire, and the renewal, the restoration, the transformation of the tragedy of the fire to something new was certainly a time for celebration. And I, along with millions of you, You you probably enjoyed that celebration. You may not have understood it or fully comprehended what it was all about, but the whole idea of what happened was very, very important. And we enjoy that. But let's go back to Pearl Harbor because there is a rest of the story that I thought might be interesting. What happened on that December 7th affected somebody who didn't expect to be offended or transformed in any way. His name was Earl Nightingale, and he was a young fella, had joined the Marine Corps, and didn't particularly like it, but that's what he was. He was a Marine, and he was a Marine on the USS Arizona on December 7th, 1941. That's right. And the bomb hit, and over 2,500 people were killed that day, many more injured. And on that particular ship, there were well over 1,000 people who died. And of course, the memorial is still there, and it is still visited by millions of people. Well, what happened was that Earl Nightingale was a young Marine, and when the bomb went off, he was at the back of the ship, and he got blown into the water. And he survived. He survived. One of the few who did survive. And he made it back to shore in some way and lived for another day. He became, later on, as he struggled, he became a very talented radio announcer. He had the voice for it. If you listen to some of the still tapes of Earl Nightingale, he was a radio personality in Chicago, Illinois, and began, the world today. As the world turns, you might say, as what's happening now, and became a very, very popular announcer. Now, one of the things he said that helped him understand life was very simple. He said, I realized that I should be dead. I should be dead. Of course. But he was alive. And then he went on to explain that realization that he should be dead changed and transformed his entire life. He said, because I realized that nothing that would happen to me, nothing that would go wrong with me, no matter what I suffered, I was still very fortunate because I was still alive. And as a result of that, he said, I really got over my fear of death because I knew that death will come to me, but every day I live is a gift to me, and eventually death will take me as it takes all of us, but I will have still had the opportunity to live, and obviously look what I have been able to do. I've lived well and achieved well. Ernest Becker, many years ago, and a few years after that, wrote a book called The Denial of Death. And you might want to look at it sometime. The Denial of Death. Some people read it consistently, but it was very much of a transformational book because what he suggested was that if we could come to the point that we would no longer fear dying, that we will look it straight in the eye, the possibility that when death lost its grip of fear over us, we would lose most of our other fears because our fears of everything else was rooted in our fear of death. And so to have great power in life might be to be in such a situation that you could be transformed if you no longer had that deep dread of death. What do you think about that? Does that make sense to you? As I've gotten older, I found that it more and more does, because, my mortality is soon to be upon me no matter what. But on the other hand, that does comfort me in knowing that I can take risks, that I can do things that may go wrong, but you know what? I've lived long, I've lived well, I've been blessed. And so that anxiety or that anxiousness that certainly took a part of my life when I was young, and even when I was not so young, and it's still a little bit there, but the idea that, I've been fortunate tends to give me a greater peace and state of mind and less fear. And as they often say, oftentimes what we want in life is we're not going to be fearless, but if we could fear less in a fearful world, we would be blessed. And so Earl Nightingale went on and had a very successful career, and did very well in life. But there was something else that happened, and it's an interesting story. You see, what he all of a sudden decided to do, he said, well, I like to talk and I like to speak, and maybe I should go out and just give talks or presentations sometimes. But he didn't think that he'd really get into that. But he was approached one day by an insurance salesman, an insurance agent who had a number of insurance agents working for him. And I would think it was a part of what was called the Franklin Life Insurance Company. And he asked if every Saturday would Earl Nightingale come and speak to his sales meeting as kind of a motivational, how to sell, how to make life happen, because that's what he talked about: inspirational, motivation, how to sell, how to persuade. And he enjoyed that. He thought he looked forward to that. And because he was so good at it, the sales manager, the sales agent, knew that his other agents would come to the sales meeting because they really enjoyed, meeting this radio personality and learning from him and enjoying it. It was a can't miss kind of meeting. Well, one day Earl had a vacation schedule. And so he called up the guy and said, I'm not going to be there Saturday. And the guy said, well, if I tell my agents that you won't be there, most of them won't come. And then he said, well, maybe you could record it. Could you record a talk like you would give? You're on the radio, you have the tape recorders there. Could you record a talk? And then when they come, I can play it for them. And he said, I'll still pay you for it. Well, he said, well, that's okay, sure, I'll do that. And he did. And it went well. And as long as he had that there, he decided to share it with some friends. And they said, well, this is really good. You ought to do more of this. I said, really? Well, it transformed everything. Then he found himself not only on his daily radio program in Chicago, where he had a good-sized audience, but then with a partner, he started to create, recordings. And at first, they were actually real records. He made records. And one of the greatest ones, one of the first ones, was The Greatest Secret. And it was very popular. And of course, there we had the very beginning of the audio books. of the recorded cassettes and recordings of various motivational talks and speakers. And what happened was that he started his own company, became the Nightingale Conant Company, and even to this day, there were the hundreds, maybe even thousands of motivational tapes and programs that were performed. And long after his death, he died prematurely in terms of age. The fact that he perhaps still had a little trauma from that Second World War. He was rumored to have had be a heavy smoker, and perhaps that caused his untimely demise, even though he'd still lived a good life. And so there we are. Interesting that the transformation that led him to become a risk taker, an entrepreneur, and try new and different things came out of the fact that he realized that his life had been transformed when he escaped death on December 7th, 1941. And then when someone said, well, could you record a program for us? And that led to a whole new transformation of his life and business. And in effect, meant that he was able to have, as I oftentimes say, a touch of immortality, because his lessons and his teachings and his words of wisdom, and he was a man of great wisdom, great insight. I've learned a great deal from him. I still listen to him to remind myself of the things that he taught us. And I remember particularly one of his incredible quotes. He said this: treat every person you meet as if they were the most important person in the world. And that transformed me. Wow. You know, it just might transform you. What if we could really live that way? What would happen to life and business if we would treat everyone we would meet as if they were the most important person in the world? Maybe that will transform you. I try to live that way a lot. I'm not so sure I succeed, but it always is with me, you know, whoever they are. Treat them as if they were the most important person in the world, because maybe they are. Maybe you are. I also, with a smile, he said, you know, not all of us need educating, but all of us from time to time need reminding. Yeah. And that is true of life. We all need reminding. We all need to remember how grateful we could be, should be. We always need to be reminded of the good things that have come to us. Maybe even reminded of the mistakes we've made so that we can do better and not make them again. All of us from time to time need reminding. Well, all of those stories emerged out of what happened to, I think he was 17 years of age, a young Marine who on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1941, just was fortunate enough to be at the back of the ship. And when the bomb went off, rather than being below and killed and terribly, destruction and death, got blown into the water and went on to a life of multiple transformations. Just thought I would give you as another one of my heroes, because Earl Nightingale is still one of my radio heroes. Another radio hero, Paul Harvey, who always told stories, said, And now perhaps you know the rest of the story. Well, that's my challenge to you on this December 7th, as I remind myself of the good feelings I got when I saw that the Notre Dame Cathedral, and I've been there many times, and when I saw it burning, my wife and I, and we just wept because it was so sad. Oh. And now it's been transformed into a victory, into a good thing that is inspiring people. And if you were with me as we watched the program, one of the things they did is they honored the firemen who helped put that fire out. And I guess many of them, at almost the cost of their lives, it was very dangerous. Here you are in this big cathedral and things are crashing down and you're still trying to save it. And then the many of them young people, young and talented artists who then were involved in the restoration. And even the young people who were singing at the festival today, in many ways, I'm sure those were transformational events. As I watched, as the firefighters were brought in and still in their fire outfits for their honoring thing, is you could just tell this was wonderful. This is at least a small transformational event in their own lives, something they'll be able to tell their children and their grandchildren, and in its own way, what happened for them has a touch of transformation in their own lives. Well, there we are, December 7th. It was fun to have you, and perhaps you could respond to me as we've talked about the transformation zone. And here's what I'd like you to do. Those of us who are putting this together, my friend Kevin, my friend Joe, who's writing the book, we would love to hear your stories of some of the events in your life that could truly be transformational. I'd love to hear from you. And perhaps we can share these stories because this transformation zone is going to become a regular podcast. And we're going to talk about how perhaps we can be involved in transforming our own lives, helping to transform others, to transform our businesses, transform our organizations, maybe in a small way, transform the world. Or as someone said, we may not change the world. Maybe we can transform it in some ways. Maybe we can even make it a different world. Wouldn't that be something? To truly live a fully alive, transformed life. Well, there we go. Thank you for your time. And I trust that perhaps as you go into 25, you might just say, maybe I should be more aware and more mindful and seek to not just have another year, but maybe this could be a year of real transformation in my life, in my business, in the things that are important to me, that I can, walk out of the darkness and into some new light and into some new experiences that I've never had before, and to do it bravely because I know, I can do it because I have less fear in an oftentimes fearful world. Take care. Bye for now.